For the last 10 years, my wife Siobhan and I have run the First Communion program for the children in our parish. Throughout the program, we teach about the Eucharist and what it means to receive such a beautiful and meaningful meal at Jesus' table. One of our favorite portions of the program is when we gather the children and their families, and together we recreate the Last Supper. We dress the tables with colorful tablecloths, and we put out a spread of grapes, hummus, olives, and unleavened bread. The children and their parents also dress in large flannel shirts and bathrobes to look like the people dressed in Jesus' time. In order to help the children understand why Jesus called his disciples together for the Last Supper, we start by asking them what they would need to do if they were preparing to go on vacation. The responses from the children and their parents are what you might expect. They would pack their bags, bring along some special toys for the airplane, make arrangements for the family pets, and one child made sure to tell me that he would make sure the refrigerator door was shut before they left. From there, we asked them what it might take that if instead of going on vacation, they were moving to another country. Again, we hear some answers you might expect. Kids tell us how they would pack their toys and think about what their new school might look like. Parents tell us all the things they might have to do to sell their house and buy another. Without fail, each year one of the kids gives us the answer we are waiting for. After the house is packed and everybody is ready to go, they would call all of their family and all of their friends, and they would have a huge goodbye party. They talk about taking time to tell everybody they love them, and they talk about how sad it would be to leave everyone. It is then that the guest of honor at the reenactment of the Last Supper, playing the role of Jesus, talks to the children about how he must leave this world. And even though he is deeply sad, he tells them not to worry, and that they must continue to live like he did, loving everyone and being in service to others. I can't help but think of the fear and the heartache that Jesus and his disciples felt on this night so many years ago. The heartache that their most beloved friend and teacher would be leaving this world, and they would no longer be able to look in his eyes or feel his touch. The fear that their master and teacher would no longer be here on earth to lead them in the work they have been doing to reach out to the poor, to heal the sick, and teach about love, compassion, and equality. In one way or another, we have all experienced this in our own lives, this fear and heartache. I remember the night too well almost 2 years ago when my mother, lying in her hospice bed, called us into the room at the Leo Center on Portland Ave. One by one, as we all walked in the door, she welcomed us with a smile. She was alert, energetic, and happier than she had looked in a very long time. My mother was in service to others her whole life. If you were ever in her home, she would not rest until you were full of food and comfortable with everything you needed. So it was no surprise that as we were entering her hospice room, she greeted us and said, "Come in, go make a plate to eat and get anything you want to drink." Well, there was no table full of food, and there were no drinks to make. There was nothing but an empty space in front of a window. The buffet table of food was an hallucination she was having. The nurses thought that it might be from the pain medication she was taking. I happen to think that it was because in my mother's mind, for someone whose mission it was to always take care of others, she needed that table to be there, so she created it in her mind. She needed to take care of us one more time, and when she called us together one last time, she asked us to keep taking care of each other. She asked us to be good to each other and to keep loving people and being the loving people she knew we were in the world. Tonight, we hear Jesus' last message to his disciples. But as he gathers them for their Last Supper, he does not give a speech that he carefully prepared. He does not recite a list of guidelines he wishes for them to follow once he is gone. Instead, he puts his words into action by washing their feet. Think of the irony here, that the Son of God, the teacher and the master, kneels to wash the dirty feet of his disciples. The King of all kings and the Lord of all lords fills a basin with water, gets a towel, and assumes the role of a servant. Where have we ever since seen a king kneel before his servants? Where have we ever since seen a master bow to his apprentice? Unfortunately, it is something so rare that we may have never seen it since, because that is not how most of the world works. In the world we know of, there are systems of power. At the top of these systems are the rich, the powerful, and the privileged. At the bottom are the poor and the marginalized, the refugees and the immigrants, the oppressed and the exploited, the unemployed and the invulnerable, and at the bottom are those without power and those without a voice. Jesus and his radical way of love and devotion to the people at the bottom does not come up with a plan to work his way to the top of the system to try and convince the powerful to change their ways. After all, would they listen? Instead, Jesus finds the bottom of that power pyramid and puts himself in last place. We can see why Jesus was so loved and so respected by the people. I worked as many years for restaurants. However, one of the restaurants I worked in served as a corporate training headquarters for managers who were being hired for the restaurant. Managers would come through our location and learn what they needed to do to be a great manager. I remember one trainee was astonished that all of the employees did whatever our general manager asked, and we did it without complaining and without question. He said, "I don't get it. No matter what this guy asks you to do, you do it, even if it's not your job or it doesn't fit your job description." I said, "Look at him. Right now, he's sweeping in the kitchen with a line cook. 20 minutes ago, he helped take out the trash with the dish crew. And last night, he was on his hands and knees scrubbing all the baseboards in the kitchen with the kitchen crew. We did whatever he asked because he never asked us to do anything he didn't do also himself. He never used his power as the manager to perch in the office while his lowly employees did the dirty work. He led his team by working in the trenches with us, and we respected him for it." Jesus assumed the role of the servant to wash the feet of his disciples, and for most of them, this was okay. But as far as Simon Peter was concerned, this was not the place for Jesus. For Peter, it was unacceptable. He insisted, "Jesus, you want to wash my feet? You will never wash my feet." What Peter failed to understand is that Jesus was not trying to change the power system. He was flipping the whole thing upside down. Jesus was rebuilding a new kingdom where every person was to be valued, a kingdom where every person was to be honored, and a kingdom where everyone had a place at the table. Jesus tells Peter this is why he must wash his feet, and furthermore, that Peter must come to understand why this is so. It's the only way to flip the system upside down. This is the fundamental and crucial message of Jesus' new church, that we must be in last place in order to be first, that we must serve others in order to be served. In January of 1945, a 13-year-old Jewish girl from Poland named Edith Zier managed to escape a Nazi concentration camp. After running for 3 days, she lost all of her energy, sat down, and propped herself against a wall at a train station in Poland. For 2 whole days, she sat there starving, unable to summon the energy to stand up and continue on. But people kept walking by, staring and ignoring her as they passed. It was then that what she described as a well-dressed Polish priest risked his own life to pick her up, carry her in his arms to a train car, feed her, and get her into hiding for safety. His name was Karol Wojtyła. However, we know him better as a different name when he became Pope John Paul II in 1979. Edith said that was the first time she experienced anyone looking into her eyes the way he looked into her eyes. No one had ever looked at her like she had any value in the world. She said that it was the first time she looked into someone's eyes and saw in them the reflection of someone seeing her dignity and worth. Above anything else, Jesus is setting that example for us when he is the model of service and putting others first. Jesus is asking us to look into the eyes of the people we serve with the same gaze as we look at the loved ones we cherish, adore, and honor so much. Jesus is asking us to hold those at the bottom in prayer, the same way in which we hold in prayer our children, our parents, and our closest friends. When Jesus is done washing the disciples' feet, he gathers with them at the table and gives one more vital piece to our role in this new radical world. This kingdom that Jesus has created here on earth is not for us to sit and observe. Jesus said, "I have washed your feet. I have served you. What I have done for you, you must also go out and do." There is a lot going on in the world today. We are feeling the effects of it in our own communities, and our children are feeling the effects of it in their own schools. There are also a lot of people at the top of many systems in today's society, those power systems, and they're speaking very loudly about how things should be. If Jesus was here today, he would say that people can speak loudly, but actions speak louder than words. He gathered his disciples around his table to call them to greatness. He called them to flip the system and become catalysts to spread radical love and be the light in the world that God created them to be. Tonight, we will gather at Jesus' table right here in this room. And when you come up to this table, know in your heart that Jesus is calling you, just like he did his disciples, because you are the light that God created you to be. We are called today to continue the work that Jesus modeled for us. And we are called to do that in a world that needs us now more than ever. We are called to live through action, to speak out to the poor and the marginalized, to serve the refugees and the immigrants, to serve the oppressed and the exploited. And we are called to serve and give a voice to those without a voice. It's not easy, and Jesus never said it would be. But let's keep gathering at this table and answering that call to take Jesus' radical love to a world that needs it and help redefine God's kingdom here on earth.